Hey guys, tonight we begin with one of the most unwanted job descriptions in medieval Europe, the executioner. And that's saying something in a time when rat catcher and full-time plague survivor were legitimate career paths. From swinging the sword of justice to being cursed, feared, and socially exiled. The life of a medieval executioner was a strange, brutal paradox. He was necessary, but never welcome. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. So, you've just been born. Congratulations! You're the newest addition to a proud medieval family of executioners. That's right. While other babies are wrapped in linen and destined to become bakers, butchers, or if they're lucky, monks, you are gently placed in a cradle next to a whetstone and an axe. It's not a rattle you're shaking. It's a future. In the Middle Ages, execution wasn't a job you applied for. There was no town hall resume submission. It was inherited, like a really cursed family heirloom. If your father was the executioner, you were the next in line. Simple. No room for career changes. No hopes of becoming a traveling bard or a slightly sad shoemaker. Your path was laid out, and it ended at the chopping block. From the moment you're old enough to walk, you're already getting side-eyed by villagers. Other kids run from you at the well. Adults lower their voices when you walk by, as if your tiny toddler hands are already soaked in symbolic blood. Spoiler, they are, symbolically, of course. For now, you grow up in a house where the family dinner table conversations are less, "How was your day?" and more, "How many strikes should it take to get it clean?" There's no escaping it. Your toys might include miniature gallows, and your bedtime stories involve phrases like drawing and quartering instead of happily ever after. And it's not just the job, it's the reputation. You could be the kindest, most literate, soft-spoken child in the kingdom, and people would still treat you like you sneak into homes at night, whispering threats to chickens. Your very surname might mark you. In some towns, entire family lines of executioners were labeled, tracked, and sometimes forbidden from entering churches, bakeries, or public baths. Hygiene and salvation, not for you. But hey, there are perks. You'll probably never get bullied too hard. No one wants to mess with the executioner's kid. The fear is real. You might not be liked, but you will be respected. In the same way people respect thunder or very sharp knives, so welcome to life. You didn't ask for this, but it's yours now, forever. By the time you're old enough to grow a beard or swing a training axe, you've already accepted one core truth. The town needs you, but they'd prefer you stay out of sight, preferably behind a curtain, a hill, or a moral veil of plausible deniability. As a medieval executioner, your society's walking contradiction. You do the work no one else dares to do, and for that, you're rewarded with silence, suspicion, and the occasional terrified blessing from 10 feet away. People talk to you like you're a haunted well, useful in a crisis, but deeply unsettling the rest of the time. Need someone publicly disemboweled. The town calls you, need someone invited to their daughter's wedding feast. Not a chance. You're the final solution to every problem the sheriff doesn't want on his conscience. And yet, once the deed is done, and the head rolls into the hay, everyone suddenly remembers they had somewhere else to be. Usually, anywhere that isn't next to you. In court records, you're referred to as the Blade of Justice. In tavern gossip, you're that creepy guy who probably talks to skulls. You could save a child from drowning and someone would still whisper, yes. But how many people has he chopped in half? To them, you are both punishment and paranoia. A reminder that the law has teeth, big, sharp, public ones. And let's not pretend it's just the peasants. Even nobles turn their noses up. They'll pay you in silver and pat themselves on the back for upholding justice. But you'll never be invited to dine in their halls, unless it's to demonstrate proper axe form between courses. Best of all, if something goes wrong, let's say you botch an execution or someone gets squeamish mid-torture, it's your head on the proverbial, and possibly literal, chopping block. The same crowd that cheered your last performance will turn on you faster than a spooked chicken. You're not a man. You're a tool, and everyone pretends you don't exist unless they need something violently removed. So yes, the town needs you, but they'd rather you come in through the back door, wear a hood, and leave before sunrise. What a life, huh? What do you guys think would be the hardest part of this existence? Let me know down below. All right, If you're finding this glimpse into the medieval underworld fascinating and maybe a little chilling, hit that like button. It really helps us bring more of these stories to light. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing so you don't miss out on our next journey. While other boys are learning how to plow fields, shoe horses, or, if they're especially blessed, read. Your education is a bit more specialized. You're not studying scripture or sewing techniques. You're learning how to sever spines in one clean stroke. Welcome to your childhood apprenticeship, where precision isn't optional, and failure doesn't just cost lives. It ruins your reputation before you even get one. Your father, or some grizzled older executioner with arms like tree trunks, teaches you the sacred art of not messing up in front of a crowd. Because while everyone may pretend they hate what you do, they absolutely will judge your form, footwork, and follow-through like it's the medieval Olympics. Your curriculum includes chopping techniques, because missing the neck by even an inch turns justice into a comedy show. Anatomy, because you need to know which bones are easiest to crack, and which ones will make your axe bounce back in public humiliation. And stage presence, because let's face it, every execution is a public performance. You're the final act, the main event, the reason people leave their farms and bring their kids to town square. Think of it as dinner theater, but instead of dessert, there's dismemberment. There's no practice dummy, unless you count the occasional pig carcass or extremely unlucky rebel. Most of what you learn is on the job. And let's be honest, everyone remembers your first time, especially if it doesn't go well, especially if you freeze or shake, or, heaven forbid, take more than one swing. Nothing haunts you like a half-beheaded criminal and an impatient crowd. You're trained to be calm, efficient, unshakable, but no one teaches you how to cope. There's no medieval HR department. No stress leave. No how to not think about severed heads self-care scroll. You just sharpen your blade, swallow your guilt, and get ready for the next performance. And what do you get in return for your finely honed lethal expertise? Not admiration, not gratitude, just silence, maybe a few extra coins, and the lingering stench of death on your clothes and soul. You're not just trained to kill, you're trained to carry the weight of it, quietly. Picture this. It's a sunny morning. The market square is bustling. Bakers are selling bread that smells vaguely edible. Blacksmiths are banging away with impressive confidence. And the butcher is enthusiastically waving a cleaver. Everyone is shouting prices, gossiping, living their little medieval lives. Then you show up. The crowd parts like you're carrying the plague in one hand and a severed head in the other. And to be fair, sometimes you are, but even when you're just there to buy turnips, people scatter like rats from a torch. You see, executioners were often forbidden or heavily discouraged from even entering public markets. In some towns, you had to wait until after hours to buy food. In others, you had your own special corner of shame, where vendors left your goods out for you to collect like a cursed medieval DoorDash. Why? Because apparently, the man who handles legal killings is somehow too unclean to touch a radish. If you dared to mingle with the regular folks, it got awkward fast. Merchants would grab your coins with tongs, or worse, refuse them altogether. You could be holding clean silver, and they'd act like you'd handed them a live scorpion dipped in guilt. Oh, no, not from you. Good sir, we're, out of cabbage today. Children are yanked away. Crosses are made. One particularly dramatic fishwife spits every time you walk by. Not at you, just near enough to make her feelings perfectly clear. Touching goods was risky business. If you touched a loaf of bread, no one else would want it. If you so much as grazed the apples, that entire crate might be dumped in a ditch out of sheer spiritual panic. One brush of your cursed executioner fingers, and it's farm to forbidden. Eventually, most executioners learn to send someone else to do their shopping. If they could, a relative, a bribed servant, anyone with a less unsettling aura, someone whose hands didn't smell faintly of burning justice, and so you retreat again, back to your lonely dwelling, your private food supply, your increasingly antisocial lifestyle, because even when you're off the clock, the town still remembers who you are, and they'd really prefer it if you didn't touch the cheese. Congratulations, you've got your own place. Unfortunately, it's not in town, not even close. Your new address is beyond the northern gate, past the gallows, next to the wild boars. As a medieval executioner, you don't just get the cold shoulder, you get full-on banishment by zoning law. You're not allowed to live inside the city walls with the normal people. Instead, your residence is somewhere between a hermit's hut and a haunted outpost. You're less village member and more unpleasant forest NPC. There's a reason for this, of course. a combination of superstition, religion, and good old-fashioned hypocrisy. The same folks who hire you to swing an axe at 10 a.m. don't want to risk your allegedly cursed energy wafting through the neighborhood by 6 p.m. Your house is usually located near the execution grounds, because that's convenient. Convenient for who exactly remains unclear. Not for you. Certainly, you live in the shadow of your work. Literally, gallows creaking in the wind, crows eyeing you like you're next. Sometimes, corpses still hang in view of your breakfast table. Bon appétit! The place itself, it's yours. Technically, a gift from the city, which is medieval for we dumped some lumber in a field and said good luck. Drafty, damp, and wonderfully secluded. Your home might be the only one in Christendom with a doormat that says, "Abandon hope. Ye who enter here, not for visitors, but for your own self-esteem. No neighbors, no casual strolls, no visiting merchants or passing monks. Just you, your tools, and the occasional raccoon with no sense of personal space. You might hear the church bells in the distance, but you won't hear the laughter of the marketplace. You're close enough to serve the town, but far enough to never belong to it. And when storms roll in, who rushes to check on you? No one. The town forgets you exist until the next criminal needs a very final solution. So there you live, outside the walls, a man apart, visible only when your presence is required, like thunder, ominous, functional, and best appreciated from a distance. So, you're an executioner. You live outside the walls. Your handshake is treated like biohazard, and your grocery runs require diplomatic finesse. But surely, you can find comfort in family. Right? Right. Well, here's the thing. Medieval executioners did have families. They just had a hard time starting them. See? Once your occupation is known, your dating prospects plummet faster than a heretic through a trap door. No one wants to marry the guy whose job description includes the phrase, "clean up arterial spray." Respectable families lock their doors when you walk by. Fathers hold their daughters closer. Even the town drunk, who once proposed to a goat, looks at you and says, "Bit much, don't you think?" So your dating pool ends up being shallow, very shallow. Often, the only people willing to marry executioners are other outcasts, gravediggers, knackers, leapers, or, if you're lucky, widows whose standards have taken serious structural damage. Romantic candlelit dinners. Try conversations whispered in alleys so no one sees her talking to you. And if you do manage to marry and have children, they inherit your profession like a curse sewn into their skin. Sons are trained from youth to swing steel with surgical precision. And daughters, well, they carry the name, which is usually enough to be socially exiled by age 6. It's not so much a family as it is a legally necessary support staff. Your family can't attend festivals, can't walk through town together, can't pretend to be normal for even a single Sunday. If they do go to church, they sit in the back, or they don't go at all, because even salvation has bouncers. And over time, that isolation takes a toll. You love your children, sure, but you also pass them a future that smells like blood and loneliness. The family tree doesn't grow, it repeats. Same job, same shame. Same invisible wall between you and the rest of humanity. There are no proud portraits, no family crests, just a long line of people who wore hoods not to hide their faces, but because the world never wanted to see them in the first place. So, you've executed your duties, literally, all week. You've lopped off heads, disemboweled a heretic or two, and maybe even cleaned your blade with holy water out of sheer anxiety. Surely it's time to confess your sins, right? Light a candle, say a prayer, start fresh. Well, not quite. In the eyes of the medieval church, you're somewhere between necessary evil and walking contradiction. Yes. You enforce divine justice. Yes. You serve the state and uphold law and order. But also, and this is important, you kill people for a living, which, inconveniently, is a sin. And so, despite doing God's dirty work, you are not exactly welcome in his house. Many executioners were outright denied confession. Some priests wouldn't listen. Others insisted you undergo ritual cleansing before stepping inside the church, which is tricky because no amount of soap washes away a reputation. And don't even think about receiving Holy Communion. That was reserved for clean souls. Yours is more of a permanent stain. It's a cruel irony. You kill with state approval, yet spiritually, You're treated like a man who strangles kittens for fun. Even lepers, who at least had a medical excuse, were often treated with more compassion. Weddings, not in the church. Christenings, maybe, if the priest is having a generous day and half the town isn't glaring at him. Funerals, don't count on it. Some executioners weren't even buried in consecrated ground. They got the ditch outside the cemetery walls. Prime real estate for exiles, suicides, and people who forgot to tithe. So where does that leave you? Spiritually, nowhere comforting. You spend your life surrounded by death, and yet you have no path to forgiveness. You can't unburden yourself. You can't cry to a friar or light a votive for your sins. Instead, you carry them, quietly, heavily. Sometimes you drink. Sometimes you scream into the woods. Sometimes you just sharpen your blade again. Even when you believe you're doing right, when the law is clear, the trial fair, you still go home unsure whether you're damned by man, by God, or both. Because even in a world where everyone sins, you're the one who made a profession out of it. There's nothing quite like the pressure of performing executions in front of a screaming crowd. It's part justice, part ritual, part public entertainment. And you're the main act. Forget about nerves. Forget about bad weather. The crowd doesn't care if your wrist hurts, if your stomach's empty, or if the axe is a little dull from last week's double hanging. They came to see a show, and you're holding the spotlight and the blade. The goal is simple. One clean swing. A fast, clean beheading is the gold standard. Anything less, and the murmurs begin. Miss by an inch. The crowd gasps. Take a second swing. They groan. A third. Now they're booing. Some are laughing. One kid just started crying. Someone throws an onion. And let's be honest, you feel it too. The shame, the failure, the victim still twitching on the block, the blood spurting wrong, your boots sticky with regret. You weren't trained for this part. The psychological shrapnel that comes from turning someone's last moment into a civic embarrassment. Sometimes the axe gets caught in bone. Sometimes the condemned jerks at the last second. Sometimes your hand just slips. And in those moments, your entire reputation, and possibly your job, hangs in the balance. Because here's the thing, no one cares how hard the job is. They just want it to look easy. Executioners are supposed to be clinical, unemotional, precise. If you falter, you risk looking weak. And in a world obsessed with strength, weakness is contagious, and the rumors spread fast. He needed 2 swings. His hand was shaking. The guy suffered. You become a cautionary tale whispered in bread lines. Don't end up like that poor soul. Or worse, like the guy who couldn't even finish the job. So you go home, scrub your blade, and relive every mistake, every gasp, every groan. You replay it until your mind is too tired to keep spinning. And even then, it lingers. Because in your world, the axe doesn't just fall on the condemned. It hovers over you too, every time you step onto that platform. So you've done the deed. The crowd has gasped, gawked, and dispersed. The condemned is headless. Justice is served. And the village square is back to selling cabbage. Time to pack up and head home. Right? Not even close. Being an executioner wasn't just about swinging an axe. That was the dramatic part. The flashy moment. The rest, far messier, far quieter, and far more grotesquely underappreciated. Because someone has to deal with the body, and surprise, it's you. You might be asked to burn the body, bury it in unconsecrated ground, or stuff it into a shallow grave under the gallows. The medieval equivalent of a garbage chute. No funeral, no ceremony, just the faint hope that the local dogs don't dig it up, and you don't get gloves, or soap, or a break. You are, effectively, the sanitation department of death. The final cleaner of sin, the silent janitor of justice, and no one thanks you. In fact, the same people who cheered the execution now avoid you even harder because you smell like ash and entrails. There are also the side jobs. Torture. That's on you. Branding criminals. You again. Public shaming setups. You're the guy with the hammer and nails. Sometimes they'll even have you flog someone while reading scripture aloud. Multitasking your way through a moral meltdown. Oh, and if a noble demands discretion, guess who's cleaning up the noble's mess with 0 witnesses? And a very real understanding that if anyone talks, they're next. Executioner by title, yes, but by function. Your medieval society's all-purpose horror technician. When the crowds disappear, the priests go silent, and the court scribes head back to their parchment. You stay behind. You finish the job no one else can stomach. For all the fear, revulsion, and existential dread wrapped around your role, being an executioner does come with one undeniable perk. You get paid. In fact, You're often paid more than your average peasant, sometimes much more. Executions, torture sessions, dismemberment duties, they all come with a tidy purse of silver. Add in bribes for extra discretion or making it quick, and you might even find yourself with the kind of money that makes bakers envious. But here's the catch. You can't spend it like a normal person. You walk into a tavern with a jingling pouch, and suddenly the room gets real quiet. The barkeep pours your ale, then wipes the counter like your presence is a stain. You tip him double. He still won't look you in the eye. You go to buy a new tunic, and the tailor hands you the finished product with tongs. The coins you give him are real, but to him, they're cursed. Blood money, he mutters, as if the silver will bite him. And heaven forbid you try to give charity. One time you tried donating to the church. They took the donation, then used it to pay someone else to clean the holy relics. Just in case, sure. You can accumulate wealth. You might even build a small home with actual furniture, rare for your class. But the irony, the more you earn, the more isolated you become. You're rich, yes, but rich like a dragon, hoarding gold in a cave. Alone and feared, people assume the money makes up for the stigma, that a heavy purse balances a heavy conscience. But gold doesn't silence nightmares. It doesn't scrub blood from your memory, or buy you back your humanity. It just sits there, cold, shiny, useless for the things that matter. You don't buy peace with money in the Middle Ages. You buy silence. You buy space. You buy the right to drink alone at a corner table without being told to leave. And deep down, you know the truth. Every coin you carry was bought with someone else's last breath. That's the currency of your life. And no amount of it ever buys forgiveness. In a town of maybe a few hundred people, everyone knows who you are. They know your name, your house, your footsteps, your job, and, most importantly, your shadow. They whisper it. That's him. They murmur it as you pass. Executioner. They pull their children close, as if you might accidentally decapitate someone mid-walk. And yet, despite this widespread recognition, no one really knows you. You could have a favorite song, a childhood memory, a surprisingly decent hand at wood carving, but that doesn't matter. Your entire identity is reduced to one role, the blade. People don't see you. They see what you do. You're a living job description. Even when you're off duty, just walking to buy onions, people cross the street like you're contagious. No one asks how you're doing. No one asks if the job weighs on you, because they've already decided you don't feel anything. To them, you're not a man with doubts or regrets. You're the axe with legs. It's a strange duality. You are known by everyone, yet fully understood by no one. You're present in every courtroom sentence, every hushed bedtime story, every moral lesson whispered to misbehaving kids, but never really invited into the world you serve. When you walk into the tavern, voices quiet. When you leave, they rise again. You hear laughter, but never with you, always after you've gone. There's no, "How was your day?" No. "You holding up all right?" No. Do you ever wish it was different? If you speak too much, you're unsettling. If you say nothing, you're cold. If you smile, that's the worst. It's creepy. The man who swings the sword shouldn't be smiling, ever. And so, over time, you play the part. You become the figure they already believe you are. Grim, silent, and carved from stone. You learn to stand still, to nod, to fade. Because while everyone in town knows your name, not a single one of them knows you. You're a myth with a pulse, a necessary ghost, familiar in function, alien in everything else. After a long day of dismemberment, blood-stained boots, and polite public trauma, you finally return home to your charming little hut outside the walls. Surrounded by silence and a slight smell of iron, you take off your cloak, you lay down your axe, you sit at the edge of your straw mattress and try to be human again. But the nightmares are already waiting. You lie down and close your eyes, and there they are. The faces, not heroic, not villainous, just people. Some screamed, some cried, some mumbled prayers with trembling lips. Some looked you straight in the eye, as if to say, "You know this is wrong." And the worst ones, the ones who said nothing at all, the calm ones, the resigned ones, the ones who accepted their fate faster than you ever could. You relive every swing, you feel every bone crunch, you hear the gasps of the crowd, their disgust, their delight. You see the bodies falling in slow motion, like tragic marionettes with their strings cut. There's no escape, not in sleep, not in silence, not in drink. Believe me, you've tried. You start to flinch at everyday sounds, the clatter of firewood, the snap of rope, the creak of wooden stairs, all reminders, all echoes, and you never forget the ones you botched. the blade that hesitated, the cut that went crooked, the moan of someone who was supposed to die faster. You carry that. No one checks on you. There's no medieval counselor for post-traumatic decapitation disorder. You don't write letters. You don't cry in public. You stare into the fire and hope your soul doesn't go fully numb before your hands do. Sometimes, late at night, you ask yourself, what if they were innocent? What if justice got it wrong? What if I got it wrong? But you already know the answer doesn't matter because the sentence was passed. The crowd gathered, the axe fell, and the nightmares stayed. You were trained to kill, not to grieve. But your dreams didn't get the memo, so you wake up with clenched fists, aching temples, and blood that won't wash away because it's not on your hands anymore. It's in your head. The thing no one tells you when you become an executioner is this: you don't retire. There's no farewell feast, no pension, no golden axe mounted on a plaque. You just start shaking one day, or missing, or dreaming too loudly. And the town begins to whisper, not with sympathy, with concern, not for you, for efficiency. Because to them, you're not a man, you're a mechanism, a moving part in the justice machine. As long as the blade is sharp and the swing is steady, they nod from a distance and pretend you don't exist. But the moment you falter, the instant your hands tremble on the block, or you take a second too long with the rope, the machine creaks and they all notice, suddenly you're a problem. A liability, not because your soul is unraveling, but because you're disrupting the spectacle. The crowd didn't come to see guilt. They came to see competence. So the town begins its quiet transition. Maybe a younger man, your apprentice, your son, your distant cousin, starts handling smaller jobs. A flogging here, a branding there, then a hanging. No one tells you you've been replaced. You simply start getting fewer summonses. The coin slows. The stares change from fear to faint pity, the most dangerous kind of pity because it means they've stopped needing you. And when you're finally forgotten, it's not by accident. It's design. You fade into your cottage outside the walls, your tools rusting beside you. Your hands, once strong and precise, now tremble when you lift a cup and no one comes to visit. Your name becomes an uncomfortable footnote in village memory. Remember old what's-his-name? The one with the axe. Oh yeah. Didn't he go mad? And when you finally die, probably alone, the church still isn't sure whether to bury you inside the gate or just leave you under a tree somewhere. Because in the end, you were never part of the town. You were a service. And services, when worn out, are quietly discarded. At first, the job made sense. The condemned were thieves, murderers, heretics. You were the arm of the law, the edge of justice. You didn't question, you executed, efficiently, publicly, without hesitation. But as the years dragged on and the block grew slick with repetition, something began to itch beneath the surface of your certainty. It starts small. A man sentenced for stealing a loaf of bread. He had 5 children. No defense, just hunger. Then a woman accused of witchcraft because she muttered prayers in the wrong language. You saw the fear in her eyes, the absolute confusion as the noose slipped over her neck. And then the nobles, the ones who ordered deaths not because of guilt, but because of politics, land, jealousy, or the need to make someone disappear. You start to realize you're not just burying criminals, you're burying secrets. The executioner's block becomes a filter, one that sifts out the inconvenient, the poor, the powerless. And you're the final stamp, the one who makes it irreversible. You want to believe in law, in structure, in right and wrong, but the voices that once declared guilt so confidently now ring hollow. You've heard the crowd cheer as a man screamed. You've seen magistrates exchange glances like merchants haggling over a soul. And you were always told, it is not your place to judge. You only carry out the sentence. But what happens when the sentence is wrong? There's no room to ask, no confessional booth, no forum. You sit alone at night, sharpening your blade, wondering how many lives were ended because someone needed a message sent. And you can't say anything, not just because it's dangerous, but because who would listen? You're the executioner. No one believes the man who wears the hood. You don't get opinions. You get orders. So you bury justice, one stroke at a time. Not because you want to, but because you have to. Because in this world, truth is a luxury, and you're just the broom that sweeps it under the scaffold. And the worst part, you're starting to think you were never justice's sword, just its gravedigger. You spent your life in service, not to glory, not to gold, not even to justice, just to duty, the grim, blood-soaked kind. No one talks about it feasts. And when your end finally comes, it isn't dramatic. No poetic final words. No family gathered at your bedside. Just a cough that doesn't go away. A slow fade in a straw-stuffed bed that still smells faintly of iron and damp rope. One final breath. And that's it. No bells toll. No priest rushes to your side. No one weeps. Your body is found by a local boy, or maybe not found at all until the smell becomes a problem. The town clerk marks your passing in one sentence, scribbled on the back of a tax ledger. Executioner. Deceased. Replacement pending. There's no funeral procession. No carved headstone. Maybe a wooden marker if someone remembers, but it won't last the winter. You're not buried in the churchyard. Of course, you're laid in the earth outside the gates, the same gates you were never allowed to pass through in life. Executioners, after all, were unclean, tainted, useful, disposable. You were the one who buried hundreds, and yet no one truly buries you. The town moves on quickly. There's always another blade, another son, another poor soul who inherits the job like a curse wrapped in tradition. In the years to come, people might speak of you in fragments, the one who beheaded that baron. Remember, the one who drank alone and never looked anyone in the eye. Or worse, what was his name again? Your legacy isn't stories or children or peace. It's silence. It's absence. It's the space you fill that no one wants to talk about. And maybe that's fitting. You spent your life ensuring the guilty were forgotten. You just didn't realize you'd be forgotten with them. So, in the end, your death mirrors your life. Necessary, but never mourned. Because in medieval society, you were never meant to be remembered. You were meant to be endured. And now, you're finally not. A grim picture, isn't it? A life lived on the very fringes of society, performing its dirtiest work. It really makes you think about the roles people are forced into, and how society treats those who do the jobs no one else wants. What are your final thoughts on the life of a medieval executioner? Was it a necessary evil, a tragic fate, or something else entirely? Share your perspectives in the comments below. Thank you for sticking with this dark journey tonight. If you found this exploration into a forgotten profession compelling, please hit that like button. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next dive into the shadows of history. Until then, take care and stay curious.